really such an honor to be here. I have great respect for what each one of you does to protect all of our lives and save many lives. So it's really a privilege to be here to share with you something I'm really, really passionate about, and that's communities. I really believe that so many of the world's problems stem back to the breakdown of communities. And therefore, the solution to many of the problems also is all about building resilient, stronger, connected communities. So it's with that passion I want to share with you today, this little overview of what some of the things we've learned in the last 10 years about enabling digital communities and connecting different stakeholder groups. So let me start with a quick story, because I think it's always helpful to start with why. So this up here is my father, and he contracted polio in 1958. He was age 28. He was writing the first guidebook for Bali in 58. He contracted polio, spent 2 years in hospital, and his whole life in a wheelchair. And you can imagine the psychological implications of that. But in the 60s, in 1964 to 67, he led a 100,000-mile overland expedition to look at community approaches to rehabilitating handicapped people. And he filmed for the BBC and wrote for the Reader's Digest and set up a foundation in India that's now the world's largest community around leprosy and disability. Because my father really believed that it's very difficult for you to have dignity without contributing to your communities. And so you wanted to empower handicapped people to get jobs or start companies. And so fast forward, I came along in 1984, and where I guess I cut my teeth in communities was Dad would take me to India most years since the age of 9, and my childhood home and my second family was this world's largest community around leprosy and disability. So I learned a lot about on-the-ground work and became very passionate about communities as a vehicle for change. So some of those pictures there, and really about enabling communities to transform our world. So about 10 years ago, I started to get involved in digital communities and empowering different stakeholder groups to come together online. And I think this is really a unique opportunity in time because it's kind of going back to the future. If you think about it, human civilization now we know is about 300,000 years old. Capitalism is only about 300 years old. And so for the vast majority of human history, we've organized the way we contribute and our value in the world through the communities we belong to. So it's actually something really natural to us. It's really how we've always made sense of our world. And so it's something really obvious to tap into and enable. And technologies now allow us to do that in an unprecedented way, which we've heard many examples today. So I'm going to introduce something called networked improvement communities. This was a concept developed by this Yoda of a man called Doug Engelbart in 1963. What Doug is quite famous for is he's the inventor of the mouse that we use every day. He really shaped our lives. But in many ways, the internet itself began as a networked improvement community. And that was bringing different stakeholders together around a shared purpose. And something he said is, the better we get at getting better, the faster we will get better. So sounds obvious, sounds like a truism, but it doesn't happen very often. The connecting of improvement science with networked communities is a massive opportunity for us to leverage that isn't happening nearly enough. And really the purpose of the talk today is for me to share with you some opportunities for us to connect these different stakeholder groups so that 1 + 1 equals more than 2. In fact, it could equal 11 because we can compound each other's efforts. So a little bit about our work. So we are a platform for networked improvement communities. And it's all around social impact challenges. So we power communities, a number in healthcare, population health reform, healthcare improvement. I'm going to give the case study of the Institute for Healthcare Improvement in a moment. but we power GE's initiative in Houston, connecting 42 different stakeholder groups from public, private, and social sector around improving health in GE in Houston. Geisinger Health, their Healthy Communities initiative we power, but also we power communities for veterans and around things like education reform and now in sustainability space, so various impact challenges. But let's take a look at this case study, because I think it's really relevant. I know Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is here. They are one of the funders of the Institute for Healthcare Improvement's 100 Million Healthier Lives initiative, one of the communities we power. And if we take a quick look at the numbers, 648 member organizations participate in 100 Million Healthier Lives, 189 partner groups. There's been 537 action plans submitted. It's all about shining a light on what's working around population health. And between those member organizations that come from both public, private, and social sector, they reach more than 100 million people, 100 million patients in the US alone. 100 million, there's 100 healthcare organizations engaged in 200 communities. So what we're doing here is connecting the dots around population health. Because what we realize is population health is such a big elephant, and each one of these organizations has a piece of the elephant, but we need to bring them together in a way that enables them to connect the dots, to be able to shine a spotlight on what's working. And so some of the things they do is things like measure what matters, which is data-driven. They map the movement, so they're mapping hotspots and bright spots around the US healthcare system. They're creating live stories and inspirational stories of interventions that work. They've got a change library there where you can go and document whenever you prove with data some population health improvement, you can upload it to the change library and let other healthcare systems or healthcare stakeholders benefit from it. And other aspects there that they're bringing together in that community to really tap into the collective intelligence of those stakeholder groups. So more broadly, let's just look at how the world has shifted. The old world was predictable. It was stable, and we've moved into this what's called a VUCA world, where we've gone from stability to volatility. We've gone from certainty to uncertainty. We've gone from simplicity to complexity, from clarity to ambiguity, from comfort to discomfort. So the pace of change is now exponential. We're all familiar with that. And therefore, our old methods don't work in the way they used to. And to illuminate this, I want to look at this whole notion of integrated cooperation, how we can go from silos to ecosystems. Because right now, we live in a very siloed world. And in many ways, the way funding is distributed right now tends to build up walls rather than break them down. When you look at the distribution, particularly for NGOs, one of the unintended consequences of grant-making organizations is the grantees end up being competitors with each other for that funding. And that's a great problem. One of the results is, I like to say, NGO all too often stands for not getting organized. You know? So let's look at some parallel examples and look at what we can learn from it. Stan McChrystal was the 3-star general. He was in charge of the Allied operations in Afghanistan. He wrote this great book, Team of Teams. He's got a great TED Talk. I highly recommend it, where he illuminates this change that happened in the military, where for thousands of years, military strategy was command and control. The intel went up, and instructions went down. And it was this siloed approach, and that worked. That worked when the enemy was doing the same thing. But now, with the insurgencies, and the enemy is Al-Qaeda, where there's no other general that you're up against. You're up against this more like a web of an organization. The command and control model is just slow. It's fragile. It's brittle, and it doesn't work in the same way. And General McChrystal outlines this shift where the military strategy had to go from knowledge as power to sharing knowledge as power. And it was a radical shift in military strategy. And what I would advocate is I think we all need to make that shift in the work we're doing. So going from silos to ecosystems, we can think of this internally from the command and control, but we can also think of it across organization. So there's this notion that in the world we have enough bricks, we just don't have enough mortar. We don't have the glue connecting those bricks. And so I think the huge opportunity here is to connect those different stakeholders, to bring together that hive mind, that digital brain, and to be able to bring all of the different groups together that can contribute around the shared purpose that's now possible with these online communities. And this collective potential movement that I feel we're in right now is all about going to this post-competitive world, going from competition to cooperation. And blockchain is a major part of this. So we're launching something at the moment called Savannah, like Civics Nirvana. And it's basically a cooperative. It's a platform cooperative that we're enabling co-ops to come together around these virtual communities that connect different stakeholder groups and align financial incentives so that communities can actually get paid for working together on problems. And the idea is that communities could become more efficient allocation of labor, of capital, of resources than foundations or corporations in many cases. And this is all about this shift that you'll hear a lot of as you look more into blockchain, going from centralized to decentralized and going from decentralized to distributed. And so this is the opportunity that's now there to use these technologies to allow us not to be a hub and spoke, but to be part of the stakeholder map and part of the organizations coming together. And I'll finish up with this great quote from Buckminster Fuller, who said, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And so as we come together and brainstorm, I just challenge you to see wherever there's change, there's opportunity. And to remind you of what Kennedy said of never waste a good crisis. And together, I think we need a new human narrative. We need a new story of how people and groups can come together around a purpose and tap into our collective potential and really go from competition to cooperation. So it's with that, I encourage the collaboration, and it's a great honor to be here, so thank you.